The lights rise without ceremony, the moment already alive with the kind of tension that doesn't need words to announce itself. Jonathan Roumie steps into view, his pace unhurried, his shoulders unburdened, carrying the stillness that has come to define him. Across from him, Joel Osteen shines under the stage lights with practiced perfection, the white suit and gleaming smile meant to reassure his followers, but instead throwing his artifice into sharp relief. The contrast is immediate and intentional, one man radiating humility without effort, the other projecting confidence so polished it feels brittle. The audience senses this opposition even before a word is spoken, their murmurs rising like a current under the silence, and the cameras capture every flicker of anticipation. Osteen leans forward, eager to seize control, his voice warm but rehearsed, taking the first strike not with accusation but with theology dressed as triumph. He dismisses the Jesus of poverty and suffering as outdated, claiming that today's world seeks abundance, wealth, and victory. His words, carefully designed to stir agreement, ripple through the crowd, drawing nods and scattered applause, a reinforcement of the persona he has perfected for decades. Yet Jonathan does not flinch, does not even blink, his stillness heavier than any applause, his silence a sharper counterpoint than a sermon. The air thickens as the pause lengthens, and then his response lands, not loud but deliberate, a single line that alters the atmosphere. He has not come to debate. He has come to expose. "I came here to ask you about Sarah Martinez," he says, and the effect is immediate and seismic. The name hangs in the room like a thunderclap, shattering Osteen's composure, breaking the smooth veneer of his practiced charm. For a flicker of a second, his smile falters, and the audience catches it. The cameras freezing on a man whose confidence drains as though someone had pulled a hidden thread. Gasps ripple outward as confusion spreads among those listening, while Jonathan remains motionless, his voice steady, his presence unshaken. What had begun as a contest of theology now twists into something darker, heavier, and far more dangerous. In that moment, the power balance tilts entirely, not through raised voices but through silence and revelation, a reminder that dignity carried with patience has the strength to overwhelm even the loudest arrogance. Yet beneath the power of this shift lie small cracks. Osteen's opening words, though effective for spectacle, echo too perfectly the lines he has spoken before, sounding memorized rather than organic, and Jonathan's introduction of Sarah's name carries with it a strange dissonance when punctuated by calls to react online, reminders of hashtags and comment boxes that undercut the gravity of the moment. These elements pull against the cinematic weight, but they cannot drown it. The story has already taken root, the balance already shifted, and the cliffhanger ensures the audience will stay fixed on what comes next. Breath held for the unraveling that has only just begun. The silence left by Jonathan's words stretches until it becomes unbearable, and in that strained stillness the story fractures open, pulling the audience backward into a past they never knew existed. Sarah Martinez's face takes shape through narration, not in dramatic spectacle, but in fragments of memory. A young single mother in 1994, clutching her paycheck with trembling hands as she stepped into the Osteen family church. The stage lights dim in the viewer's imagination as the flashbacks sharpen. She listens to promises that her rent money, her grocery money, her daughter's savings will multiply if she only has enough faith. She believes it, desperate, hungry for hope, clinging to every word as if survival depends on it. For 3 years she gives everything, feeding an empire brick by brick while her own walls collapse, and the narration lingers not on her transactions, but on the erosion of her dignity. The audience inside the auditorium feels this unraveling in their own bones, their whispers filling the air as if to testify that what they are hearing cannot be fiction. Some press their hands to their mouths, some lean forward as though the truth is physically pulling them closer. Jonathan's voice cuts back into the present, cold and surgical, asking the one question that pierces the grandeur of Joel's boasts. How much of that success was built on Sarah's silence? The cameras turn, freezing on Osteen's hands, gripping the chair arms, his knuckles whitening as though he could physically hold back what is being revealed. Murmurs spread, not in the thunder of outrage, but in the subdued hum of disbelief. A reporter near the front whispers into his recorder, his words picked up faintly by the microphone. He's naming names, 30 years buried. Another voice from the crowd, hesitant and quivering. I lost my house the same way. Slips into the atmosphere like a confession shared with strangers. These short interjections keep the story alive in the present, grounding the backstory in the reality of an audience that now feels implicated, no longer spectators but witnesses. The flashbacks intensify as Jonathan recounts the day Sarah's daughter fell sick. The way Sarah came not with money but with questions, desperate for comfort or explanation, only to be told that her lack of faith was the reason her prayers had not been answered. The weight of that dismissal reverberates through the auditorium, a collective intake of breath, punctuating the cruelty of the words. The narration does not dramatize the pain. It lets silence and detail do the work. The late bills stacked on the counter, the sound of a child coughing in the background, the final walk to a social worker's office where Sarah whispered, "I thought God loved me." Each image lands not with spectacle but with inevitability, and the audience feels the slow suffocation of her hope until nothing is left but betrayal. The strength of this unfolding is in its intimacy, the way it ties systemic abuse to a single name and face, transforming abstract corruption into personal tragedy. The room no longer hears theology, it hears echoes of countless forgotten voices. Yet in its power lies a small flaw. The rhythm circles the same wound again and again, hammering the point of exploitation until it risks dulling the blade. The repetition of phrases about sacrifice and false promises begins to feel familiar, and though the story is devastating, the pacing occasionally drags where it could have cut deeper with fewer strokes. Even so, the weight holds. The combination of Jonathan's unwavering calm, the murmurs of journalists piecing together a buried history, and the gasps of ordinary believers realizing they, too, may have been deceived, binds the audience into silence once more. What started as a question of theology has become a confession dragged into light, a reckoning where every whispered detail pushes Osteen further toward the precipice, leaving the crowd teetering between disbelief and outrage as the story edges closer to its breaking point. The weight of Sarah's story lingers in the silence, each whispered reaction binding the audience tighter to the truth unraveling before their eyes, until Jonathan shifts slightly in his seat and reaches into his jacket. The motion is small, almost unremarkable, but the room tenses as if anticipating a weapon, and in a way it is. His hand emerges holding a worn leather journal, its edges frayed, its weight heavier than any sermon Osteen has ever preached. The cameras close in, catching the panic flicker across Osteen's eyes as Jonathan places it gently on the table between them, his voice steady as stone. Sarah kept a journal. The words slice the air, measured, devastating, needing no elaboration. Osteen's composure shatters in an instant. He rises abruptly, his voice booming with desperation, accusing Jonathan of lies, of theatrics, of attacking a ministry that has brought hope to millions. His finger jabs, his words thunder, his face contorts with rage. Yet Jonathan does not move, his calm in the face of fury more unnerving than the shouting itself. When Osteen finally pauses, panting from the weight of his own outburst, Jonathan speaks again, quieter than before, forcing the auditorium to lean in. "She was your family." The words hang like a guillotine blade, and when they fall, they sever the last thread of Osteen's facade. Gasps erupt across the hall, some sharp, some disbelieving, some muffled by tears. His face drains of color, his lips tremble without forming words, his entire presence collapsing before the eyes of those who once saw him as untouchable. The revelation lands not as spectacle, but as inevitability, the culmination of a lifetime of secrets buried under wealth and image. The crowd can scarcely process it. Sarah, the forgotten woman who gave everything, was not just another victim, but his half-sister, a daughter of his father's hidden betrayal. The shock reverberates outward like a stone dropped in still water. Each ripple another crack in the empire Osteen built on silence. The contrast sharpens with each passing moment. Osteen, red-faced and frantic, sputtering denials that sound more hollow with every word. And Jonathan, still unyielding, his eyes fixed on him with a mixture of sorrow and judgment. The cameras do not need to frame it as commentary. The images themselves speak louder than narration could. The progression is undeniable. The confident preacher who began the evening smiling becomes the raging accuser, then the man stripped bare, broken before the weight of truth. His attempt to defend himself falters under its own exaggeration. Calling, Sarah unstable, questioning her sanity, blaming her suffering on anything but his family's exploitation. It all lands with a desperate, melodramatic clang, exposing not strength, but cowardice. Each denial digs his hole deeper, each word painting him further into a corner from which there is no escape. The strength of this climax is in its sharp simplicity, the way a single journal and 2 lines of dialogue can undo decades of power. The spectacle does not come from explosions of action, but from the collapse of a mask. The sight of a man imploding under the pressure of his own lies. Yet woven into this devastating moment is a minor fracture. The story stacks revelations one atop the other. Sarah's tragic sacrifice, her death in poverty, the journal, the hidden family tie, even reminders of past scandals. And though each adds weight, together they risk crowding the moment, leaving less space for silence to do its work. The scene could hit harder if fewer blades were drawn, allowing one to cut cleanly through. Even so, the audience remains transfixed, their outrage mingling with disbelief, their cries and gasps filling the void Osteen's broken denials leave behind. In that moment, Jonathan does not need to raise his voice, does not need to condemn with elaborate speeches. The quiet words are enough. The journal, heavy with unspoken prayers, and the truth simple and unavoidable, do what no crowd, no critic, no adversary has ever managed to do. They bring Joel Osteen to his knees, not in repentance, but in collapse, leaving the auditorium, suspended between chaos and clarity as the reckoning continues to unfold. The explosion of gasps and cries still echoes through the hall when Osteen finally slumps back into his chair, his body bent forward, his hands shaking as if even the air has turned against him. The camera lingers on his face, drained of all the warmth that once sold millions of books and filled stadiums, now reduced to the pallor of a man whose empire has crumbled in front of a live audience. Around him, the crowd no longer leans in to admire, but recoils, whispering with the sharp disbelief reserved for a betrayal too large to process. Where once he commanded attention with smiles and promises, now he commands nothing but silence, a silence heavy with judgment. Jonathan does not move to strike further. He does not need to. His very calm becomes the condemnation, his presence a reminder that dignity can outlast deception. Then, softly but firmly, he speaks again, his words measured to cut through the noise without rising above it. God's love isn't for sale. The line lands with the weight of finality, not shouted, not embellished, but delivered as truth laid bare. The cameras capture the moment as if it were scripture, the line destined to be replayed in countless clips, not because it is catchy, but because it is undeniable. In that instant, the contrast sharpens one last time. Joel hunched, small, alone, while Jonathan's stillness feels expansive, filling the space with a sense of quiet authority. As the live broadcast continues, Jonathan turns from Osteen to the audience, then to the camera itself, no longer addressing one man, but speaking directly to millions beyond the stage. His narration becomes both testimony and commission, not in fiery rhetoric, but in steady conviction. He announces the launch of the Sarah Martinez Foundation, revealing that Sarah's inheritance, once hidden and hoarded, has been reclaimed and redirected to those who suffered under the same false promises. The audience rises, some in tears, some clapping, many simply stunned, realizing they are witnessing not just an exposure but the beginning of something larger. For every accusation that had destroyed, there is now an answer that builds. The cinematic weight of this ending is in the images that unfold quietly around Osteen's collapse. A neighbor turning away when he tries to smile, unanswered calls flashing on a phone screen late at night, the echo of footsteps in a once crowded sanctuary now empty. These images carry a heavier blow than shouted protests. They show the loneliness of a man who once thrived on adoration and now sits in exile within his own empire. By contrast, Jonathan is seen not as triumphant, but as steady, surrounded not by fame, but by ordinary believers drawn to authenticity. He is less the conqueror than the witness, standing for a truth that does not need embellishment. Yet woven into this resolution is a flaw the narrative cannot fully escape. The energy at times leans toward mobilization, Jonathan urging the audience to share, to join, to build a revolution of authentic faith. The language, powerful in immediacy, risks turning the climax of justice into a campaign, blurring cinematic subtlety with online fervor. Still, beneath that slight excess, the heart of the resolution remains intact. Poetic justice is achieved not by Jonathan's dominance, but by Sarah's legacy, transforming despair into restoration, her voice preserved through the foundation that now bears her name. The screen fades from the shattered figure of Osteen to the quiet resilience of the journal resting under soft light, its pages once filled with prayers unanswered, now a symbol of healing for others. Jonathan's final gaze into the camera, unhurried and unshaken, seals the message. What was exploited for profit is reclaimed for truth. The story does not end with applause or outrage, but with reflection, the realization that justice often comes not in thunder but in silence, in the dignity of those who refuse to be corrupted. And as the audience disperses both in the hall and across millions of screens, the echo of one line follows them like a verdict carved into stone. God's love isn't for sale.